Do you know someone who never misses? Someone who shows up when they are exhausted, when they are sick, when they have every excuse in the world to quit? Someone who makes you uncomfortable just by existing, because their level of commitment exposes your own excuses? You are looking at something that most people will never understand. You are looking at what the ancient Japanese warriors called Sutemi, which translates literally as abandoning the body, but means something far more profound. It means the complete death of negotiation with yourself. Let me be clear about what we are talking about here. This is not motivation. This is not discipline as you know it. This is the elimination of choice itself. And it is the most terrifying thing you will ever build in yourself, because once you build it, there is no going back to who you were before. A 2023 study from Stanford's Behavior Design Lab found that 92% of people who set goals fail within the first 3 months, not because they lack desire, but because they maintain what researchers call reversible commitment architecture in their neural pathways. Your brain is still treating your goals as negotiations. The scariest level of discipline happens when you remove negotiation completely. I am Dr. Hannah, a life, relationship, and family coach with 22 years of experience helping people transform not just their habits, but their entire identity. I researched Japanese self-care and warrior methods because they understood something about human transformation that modern psychology is only now beginning to prove. They understood that true strength is not about what you can do on your best day. It is about what you cannot stop doing, even on your worst. Comment below and tell me, what is the one thing you have been negotiating with yourself about for too long? Here is what science is now confirming. The Japanese warrior class did not train discipline the way we think about it. They trained something called Kaizen ichai, which means the sword and Zen are one. They were not trying to become disciplined people. They were trying to become people for whom discipline was not a choice, but an identity. And your brain can make this same transformation, but only if you understand what you are actually building. So let me tell you about Sutemi first, because this is where everything starts. In the context of samurai combat philosophy, Sutemi was the practice of entering a battle with the complete abandonment of self-preservation, not recklessness, abandonment of the ego's need to negotiate safety, comfort, or outcome. Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary swordsman who won over 60 duels without a single loss, wrote about this principle extensively in his Book of 5 Rings. He said that the moment you enter combat while still attached to the outcome, you have already lost, because attachment creates hesitation, and hesitation creates openings, and openings create death. But here is what makes this principle so powerful. In modern life, Sutemi is not about grand gestures or dramatic commitments. It is about the micro-death of negotiation every single day. It is waking up and not asking yourself if you feel like training. It is sitting down to work and not checking if you are inspired. It is showing up to the difficult conversation and not calculating whether you have the energy for it. Think about it this way. Every time you negotiate with yourself about whether to follow through, you are teaching your brain that your commitments are suggestions. You are installing what neuroscientists call executive override pathways. These are neural shortcuts that allow your prefrontal cortex to intervene and reverse decisions your past self already made. The scariest level of discipline happens when these pathways atrophy from disuse, when your brain no longer even generates the option to quit, when the question, "Should I do this?" never forms in your consciousness because the answer was decided long ago by a version of you who no longer exists. Now, let me show you why this works at a brain level, because this is not mysticism. This is neurological architecture. Dr. Andrew Huberman's lab at Stanford published research in 2022 examining what they call automaticity formation in high-performing individuals. They studied Olympic athletes, Navy SEALs, and surgeons, people who perform under extreme conditions without conscious deliberation. What they found was remarkable. These individuals showed 61% less activation in their anterior cingulate cortex during task initiation compared to control groups. The anterior cingulate cortex is the part of your brain responsible for conflict monitoring and decision-making. In normal people, this region lights up like a Christmas tree every time they need to do something difficult, because the brain is running a cost-benefit analysis. Should I do this? What if I fail? What if it hurts? Do I really need to? But in people who have reached what we are calling the scariest level of discipline, this region stays quiet, not because they have stronger willpower, because they have eliminated the decision point entirely. Their brain has moved the task from the category of things I choose to do to the category of things that simply happen. Researchers from the University of Pennsylvania's Center for Neuroeconomics confirmed this in a 2021 study. They found that when people maintained perfect consistency in a behavior for 90 consecutive days with zero exceptions, their brain's default mode network began to incorporate that behavior as part of their baseline identity. The behavior stopped being something they did and became something they were. Here is the mechanism. Every time you negotiate with yourself and then follow through anyway, you burn glucose that could have been used for execution. Your brain interprets this as inefficiency, but when you remove negotiation completely, when the answer is always predetermined, your brain reroutes that energy toward performance improvement instead. Dr. Wendy Wood at USC studied this phenomenon and found that people who reached what she calls habitual automaticity showed 43% higher task completion rates during periods of high stress compared to their baseline. Most people's performance drops when they are stressed. These people's performance stayed flat because stress was no longer a variable in the decision-making process. There was no decision. Your brain is not sabotaging you when it offers you the option to quit. It is trying to conserve resources. It is trying to keep you safe. But safety and transformation cannot coexist. And once you understand this, you can work with your brain instead of against it. So how do you actually build this? How do you move from someone who negotiates with themselves every single day to someone who has killed negotiation completely? Week 1 is about installation, not inspiration. You are going to pick one single behavior, and it cannot be something you want to do. It must be something that scares you specifically because of how mundane it is. Not running a marathon, not writing a novel, not losing 50 pounds. 5 minutes, one behavior, every single day at the exact same time. No exceptions. Research from the European Journal of Social Psychology found that time-specific commitments are 73% more likely to be maintained than intention-based commitments. I will exercise is reversible. I will do 10 push-ups at 6 a.m. is irreversible because your brain categorizes time-based commitments differently than intention-based ones. Most people fail here because they pick something heroic. They want the transformation to feel significant, but significance is the enemy of consistency. You are not building a habit. You are building the identity of someone who does not negotiate. The behavior itself is almost irrelevant. Week 2 is where your brain will test you. This is when the novelty wears off and you will encounter what I call the negotiation storm. Your brain will offer you very reasonable explanations for why today should be an exception. You are tired, you are busy, you already proved you can do it. One day will not matter. This is the moment. This is where the death of your old self either happens or does not happen, because if you negotiate once, You have taught your brain that negotiation is still an option. You have opened the door a crack, and your brain will spend every ounce of energy trying to wedge it open further. Here is what you do instead. You do 10%. If your commitment is 5 minutes, you do 30 seconds. If your commitment is 10 push-ups, you do 1. Not because 10% matters practically, because maintaining the chain matters neurologically. Momentum is more valuable than perfection. Week 3 is expansion, but not in the way you think. You are not adding more time. You are adding more context. You are going to do your behavior when you are tired, when you are sick, when you have house guests, when you are traveling, when you have zero desire. You are training your brain that external circumstances are not variables in the equation. A 2023 study from Harvard's Department of Psychology found that people who practiced behaviors across multiple contexts showed 57% faster automaticity formation than people who practiced in controlled environments. Your brain needs proof that this behavior happens regardless of conditions. That is how it moves from the choice category to the identity category. Week 4 is where you will feel something shift. Researchers call it cognitive offloading. You will notice that the internal argument stops, not because you have more willpower, because your brain has stopped generating the option. It has moved your behavior from executive function to automatic function. You are no longer someone who chooses to do the thing. You are someone who does the thing. But here is where most people make the fatal mistake. They think they have arrived. They think discipline is built, so they add complexity. They add more behaviors, more goals, more commitments, and they shatter the foundation they just built. This is what the ancient Japanese understood that modern culture has forgotten. Strength is not about what you add. It is about what you eliminate. Every additional commitment you take on before the first one is irreversible is a weakness. Every negotiation point you maintain is an opening for your old self to return. The scariest level of discipline is not doing many things well. It is doing one thing so completely that failure is no longer in your brain's vocabulary for that behavior. And then, and only then, do you add the next one. Let me tell you about what this really creates. A 2022 longitudinal study from University College London followed 200 participants who maintained perfect consistency in a single behavior for 6 months. They measured not just task completion, but life satisfaction, self-reported confidence, and relationship quality. What they found was that 89% of participants reported significant increases in all 3 categories, even though the behavior itself had nothing to do with relationships or life satisfaction. One woman's commitment was washing her face every night. Another man's commitment was making his bed every morning. Simple, almost meaningless behaviors. But here is what those behaviors actually built. They built proof. Not proof to anyone else. Proof to yourself that you are not controlled by your feelings. Proof that your word to yourself means something. Proof that you are not the person who quits when things get uncomfortable. The Japanese have another concept related to this called Shoshin, which means beginner's mind. In Zen Buddhism, Shoshin is the practice of approaching each moment as if it is your first time, with fresh eyes and no preconceptions. In the context of discipline, Shoshin means treating each repetition as if it is the first one, not getting bored, not getting complacent, not assuming that because you did it yesterday, you will do it today. This is the psychological payoff. You are not just building discipline. You are building the identity of someone who shows up for themselves, even when no one is watching, even when there is no immediate reward, even when the task itself feels pointless. And that identity, once fully formed, changes everything. Because now you know something about yourself that most people will never know. You know you are not controlled by your emotions. You know you can make a decision and honor it regardless of how you feel. You know that your future self can trust your present self to follow through. This is not about productivity. This is about the relationship you have with yourself. Most people spend their entire lives in an abusive relationship with themselves. They make promises and break them. They set standards and lower them. They commit and then negotiate. And then they wonder why they do not trust themselves, why they feel weak, why they feel like an imposter in their own life. The scariest level of discipline is the cure for that. It is the slow, methodical rebuilding of self-trust through undeniable proof. One unbroken chain, one behavior that you have made irreversible, one promise that you will not break no matter what. The ancient warriors understood something that modern self-help has completely missed. They understood that true strength is not about never falling. It is about removing the option to stay down. It is not about never feeling weak. It is about never allowing weakness to alter your actions. Miyamoto Musashi wrote, "Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world." He meant that your feelings, your comfort, your momentary state is irrelevant compared to your commitment. You do not need to feel motivated to start. You do not need to feel ready. You do not need to feel confident. You simply start, because that is who you are now. That is what you do. You are not trying to become someone disciplined. You are killing the version of yourself that negotiates, and something else is being born in its place, something that does not ask permission from your emotions, something that does not wait for the right moment, something that simply acts and then acts again and then acts again until the old you is so far in the past that you can barely remember what it felt like to live that way. If this resonates with you, if you are tired of negotiating with yourself and ready to build the scariest level of discipline in your own life, consider subscribing. Not because you need more information, because you need consistent reminders that what you are building is possible, that it is real, that others have done it. Remember, Sutemi. Remember that transformation requires the death of negotiation, not someday, not when you feel ready, now. One behavior, one chain, one promise you will not break. That is where it starts. That is where everything changes.